Hello.
Hello.
I'm very excited to be here with Donna Jacobs. Donna is a psychologist for over 40 years.
It's true.
Who teaches workshops and works with individuals and couples and families. And
not families, actually?
Not families,
not
okay?
families.
Just individuals and couples. And that's a good thing because today we're talking all about couples. And Donna has just authored a book called Becoming Your Best Self, Healing Through Self-Integration. So please be sure to check it out, and I will put the links in the show notes as well. So welcome, Donna.
Thank you very much.
I'm actually really excited for this conversation. This is something that I've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to get really real and
Yes.
raw and honest, and we are talking about marriage. We're going to talk about marriage and intimacy and affairs and all the things that happen in marriage that a lot of people don't talk about, but that Donna has been working with and witnessing for over 40 years. So I'm sure you've seen it all.
We don't know because I don't know what I haven't seen.
So my first question for Donna is, what are the themes that you see walk into your office?
Mm-hmm.
When and what do you see when a marriage is about to sort of be at that breaking point?
So, it's changed over the years. What I see
That's interesting in and of itself.
It really has. And part of that is actually the women's movement.
Huh.
Yeah. What I see a lot of is women bringing their men or their partners, it doesn't have to be a straight hetero couple, it's more common in the straight hetero world, but more women bringing their men in because they actually don't want to live a life with a man, I'm going to say in this sense now, who is behind the wall, emotionally unavailable, doesn't know how to deal with emotions, doesn't know how to talk about emotions, doesn't know how to feel. And I'm seeing more and more and more women come in saying, I don't want to do this anymore. It's like living alone. I need somebody who's there for me, who understands me, who can actually feel for me and with me.
Hmm.
And
I see you say women bringing men in, but women have struggled with that too. Feeling, right?
Yes.
Like,
of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So
of course,
when the women bring the men in, do you not often see that they too are struggling sometimes? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I do. But in this context, it's so
usually the men.
Obvious because the men are often really, really shut down. They haven't learned how to deal with emotion. They've been socialized in that sort of patriarchal, typical male way. They don't know how to talk about emotion. They don't know how to feel. A lot of them don't know how to feel.
Okay.
I
so
had
not even a breaking point necessarily. So you're saying is when people come in, it's not even necessarily like this big trauma has happened. You're seeing a lot of people come in just because women want to be more emotionally connected.
Yes, and they've lived with it. It could be a breaking point.
Yeah.
Because they've lived with it and lived with it and lived with it and saying, I don't want to do this anymore. There's an interesting statistic about marriage that we know that monogamy is hard. We know that.
Why?
Let me come back to that.
Okay.
We know that there's so much to talk about. We know that 50% of marriages end in divorce. Yeah. And of the 50% that are left, there's a lot of unhappy people. Mm-hmm. And the new stat is that over 2/3, so close to 67 to 70% of divorce is actually initiated by women.
Huh. Now, is that
I would say in the last 10 years.
Interesting.
Women are, and it really is part of the women's movement that's been growing and growing and growing. Huh. That, I don't necessarily need a man. I don't want to live with a man who's so shut down. Mm-hmm. I want connection. I want intimacy. I want to be heard. I want to be seen. I don't want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And I'm okay on my own, and I can do it on my own. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting. That's why the women are dragging their men to therapy. Mm-hmm. And
see if the therapy can maybe open up that emotional.
Yes. Because we sure do see a lot of shut down people. Yeah. And men just need, they really, I love working with men, and I love working with shut down men because they don't know how to do it yet. Mm-hmm. And in therapy and with their partner, it's a really powerful thing. I remember seeing somebody, I asked, they came as a couple, and she said, he doesn't know anything about feelings. And I asked, how do you feel?
To the man.
And he stopped. And he had nothing. And I had to teach him what actually feeling words were, right? I feel happy. I feel confused. I feel lost. I feel frustrated. I feel resentful. I feel excited.
Wow. I want to ask though, why does that happen?
Well,
how does that happen?
Yes, it happens.
I know that's a whole topic, but I just
it
think
is.
It's an important
in a
question.
nutshell, I really do think it still is this socialization. It still is the socialization. There is real DNA. A quick offside example.
Yeah.
You know, I know friends of mine had a son and a daughter, and they wanted to socialize both of them, sort of just gender neutral. And they bought their son. Their son was playing with Barbies with his sister. And she walks into the room and she sees her son with the Barbie, with her legs like 90 degrees going, using it as a gun, right? So there is something, we can't deny some of the DNA. We know that there is socialization. We do treat our boys different than our girls. We do. And it's
changing.
It is changing. It is. But there still is that. So, you know, boys are socialized differently. There's different expectations of boys. And it depends what family you grow up into, right? That's really a huge part, is the family and what the family teachings are. I still know, you know, men who are teaching from, you'll do it because I said so, because I'm your father. Oh, okay. Right? So what does that say to somebody? That's a way to shut somebody down pretty quickly. So it is changing, and I'm seeing the big change that women are mostly bringing their men to therapy. Men bring their women to therapy. Again, this is just a hetero that I'm talking about. When there's been an affair. Either he's had one and she found out.
Come when there's been an affair.
Yes. Okay. So they they say we've got to go for help if they've been caught, or if they find out that their partner's been having an affair, and you see incredible vulnerability.
Yeah, coming to therapy because of that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you're saying what usually brings people to therapy in a couple is women coming because the men can't feel, and they're
a big part of what
you see,
right?
Yeah. Which I'm sure is, you know, quite typical. You've been doing this for 40 years. You've seen lots of couples. And affairs, obviously affairs. What else?
So in terms of there's a wide range of other things. In-laws, parents, huge problems. Huge problems, because, you know, we've adapted to our families of origin in very different ways than the in-law would coming into the family. The in-law would say, how do you put up with this? This is absolutely unacceptable. I don't want your father talking to my kid like that. How do you put up with that? Right? So those kinds of things, because as I say, we adapt to our families of origin.
And then when we have a whole other family, you're saying that can cause issues too.
Yes, and then we don't see our families of origin or our parents through the eyes of our partner. That's the in-law.
Yeah.
So they're looking and saying, how do you do that? That's a big problem.
Interesting. I want to get back to the monogamy thing and why it's so hard from a psychological perspective, because, you know, we knew, your generation already knew that affairs were happening in your generation too. Do you find that cheating and affairs are getting more prevalent with my generation, or as, do you know what I'm trying to say? I do, but maybe it's just because of it's my age, right? I'm 40, and so we're seeing it more. But do you think it was happening just as much in your generation?
Probably. I mean, I do think it's prevalent.
Okay.
But I do think that they probably were happening as much. There are different ways that people find out about affairs now that maybe they didn't have access to before. There's all this
internet,
social media, all of that is killing it. Phones. That's how most people are finding out, doing their detective work. Right? Yes, and affairs, you know, monogamy is really hard.
Why?
Right? Because
I mean, I understand, but I want to know from why. Like, what is this?
There is so much that part of the research is saying that there is so much stimulation out there, right? You can get anything at any moment at any time.
So that is
part of it. It's tempting.
That is because of the social media, because of the phone.
I do think so.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, it's like, you know, an addict. If you're an addict, you don't want to be put in front of, working in a liquor store, right? So it's similar, that you may already have the propensity, but then everything is there for you.
Okay.
And monogamy is difficult. And a lot of people in the field, you know, say that after an affair, we actually develop a second marriage, but it's a second marriage within your first marriage.
What do you mean by that?
It's just a different marriage. Because now you find out why the affair happened, was the person not getting in the relationship? Why did they
and
look
do you
outwards?
find so do you find that people are looking outwards because of what they're not getting, or people are looking outwards because monogamy is just hard?
I think monogamy is hard. I think our people are looking outside because they're not getting what they want in marriage. I think there's a factor of also narcissism.
What do you mean by that?
That many people feel, I do it because it feels good, and I don't care. It's about me. It's about what I need and what I want. So if you look at the reasons why people have affairs, put sexual addiction aside.
Yeah.
It can be a narcissistic, the frat boy. I do what I want. I get what I want. I don't care.
Okay.
It can be a reflection of the marriage. If it's, any of those can be worked on. If it's that latter one, something in the marriage is missing, well, that's where you develop your second marriage.
That's where it can heal the marriage,
It's
correct?
because you're not looking at the issues of what allowed you to stray.
Yeah.
And this is where you create a new marriage of, what do I need? What was missing? How was I behaving? How was I not intimate? What happened? One more thing about affairs. Affairs is not relational. I mean, I shouldn't say affairs. Affairs that become relational.
Affairs can come in all different shapes and sizes. It
Yes.
could be a one-night stand.
Yes.
It could be an emotional affair. It could be fantasy.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There could be, you could be drunk at a bar and kiss someone
Right,
one night.
right,
There's so
Yes.
many different.
Yes. Yeah. To have sex outside the marriage just for sex is not relational.
Okay.
Right? Relational is
so different healing that comes from that.
From what do you?
So I'm saying, when someone shows up in your office and they've had a one-night stand versus someone who shows up in your office and they've been in a full-on emotional affair with another woman or man, I assume that the healing that comes from that is very different.
Very different.
Right? Probably the spouse can deal better with the just
one-night
physical than with the emotional.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because the emotional's hard. But, even with the physical, Jody, what happens. People want to know, where were you and how often did you do it? And did you do it in my house? And was it in my bed? And when I was there and in the hospital, were you with her? It goes on and on and on for both, either partner.
Right. And how do you gain trust back?
Well, that's the hard one. And I do want to say that is the piece that the involved person has to be really, really patient with. It takes years to rebuild trust after an affair. And what often happens is that the involved partner will say, I said I was sorry. How long is this going to go on? I said, I'm sorry. It's been a few months. Do we have to go over this again? I can't, right? And remember that the hurt partner is just starting to move out of the gate. Their day one might be their day 4,213. So trust takes a long, long time.
Do you see marriages thrive after affairs?
I do. I can. I have.
Okay.
I have.
And what is the difference between a marriage that can survive, affair or not, affair, trauma, maybe just even lack of intimacy? Right? Because I think that's another thing too. And I want to really break that down as well, is why intimacy seems to get harder as marriages get on. You'd think it would be easier, but it seems to be harder. Why couples can go years without having sex and not, think that that's a problem.
Yes.
And how to rebuild that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is you can't compete with the sexual excitement of a new partner. No relationship can compete with that, ever. If you're really relational, it turns into something else. It turns into a loving, intimate.
You're saying in a marriage.
In a long-term relationship.
Once you're through the sort of newness of it, you're now in a marriage, you're committed.
Yes.
That relational piece changes.
It changes.
Okay.
I talk about the example of the newness of a relationship. Let me just walk you through this for a second. So I say my example is I've met somebody new. Oh my God, Jody, oh my God, look, my heart flutters. I think about him and it's unbelievable. I can't wait to see him. I just want to tear his clothes off, right?
We all know that feeling.
And we all know that, right? And people stretch their boundaries at the beginning of a relationship. So my example is he loves fishing. I hate fishing, but you know what? being with him, and we're in the boat in the middle of the lake, and we have a picnic and with a bottle of wine, and he has his arms around me and he's showing me how to hold the fishing rod and he's nuzzling my neck. Oh my God, I love it, right? I could sit there hours and we're making out in the boat and it's fabulous, right?
Mhm.
Fast forward,
I'm like,
fast forward the tape, okay? 6 months, right?
6 months. I was going to say 10 years.
Okay, 6 months, and what? I have other stuff to do. I don't want to go sit in a boat. I can't stand fishing. I hate the smell of fish. Do you want fish wiggling and like gasping for breath? I can't stand it.
Mm.
So we push our boundaries and our comfort levels to get all of this kind of stuff that we really want, which is very short-lived in a relationship.
Always,
So
yes.
you can't compete with that. Okay. But it turns into something else, much deeper, much more comfortable, much more, much more intimate, actually.
Mm-hmm. So then why do we lose then the physical, not we, like all of us, but why do a lot of marriages lose the physical intimacy? And that, I assume, creates problems, yes, right? When we let that go, even when we've had young kids, right? I mean, I get it. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old,
mm-hmm.
and I work full time, and I have a lot going on, and I'm exhausted at the end of the day, right? And I can see how easy it would be to let that go, but it obviously creates problems. So I want to hear from you preventatively, mm-hmm. right? Because I hope that the couples that are watching this, want to take some insight what they could do preventatively mm-hmm. to not end up, mm-hmm. In a marriage with an affair, or where the one's emotionally vacant or whatever. Yeah. What can we do to ensure that we stay connected in that way? And why does it become harder?
Yes. Okay, so I think that firstly, couples have to continue talking about sex.
Okay.
They have to keep talking about what they like, what's exciting, what doesn't work for them anymore. I think that, a lot of couples...
Not just when they're having sex?
No, not when
saying
they're having
just
sex. I think that you have to, if you're seeing that sex is starting to dwindle, yeah, there's reasons for that.
Okay. What would some of them be?
Well, the early years that everybody will talk about is I'm exhausted, I'm working, I have young kids, I'm up all night. It's not an activity that does for me what it used to do. Okay. Right?
So stress, busyness,
it's difficult. Okay. People get sick, people are tired, people are hungover. I mean, whatever it might be, it gets really tough. Okay. So you have to keep the conversation going. Now, I'm going to say something that a lot of people are going to roll their eyes at. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go out on a limb here, okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Sex, yes, is intimate. It contains something. It's also, at some points in a long relationship, one person might like sex more than the other. Like one person may want sex more than the other. Do you find
that when you work with couples, there's always one?
Very seldom do I see a mutual. Very seldom. I do, but very seldom.
So usually there's one that wants it and one's kind of
more hypo, one's more hyper.
Okay.
There's no question. Yes. So we have to keep the conversation going. There are lots of things that we do as a couple. Like, think about this, that we do for our partner that we don't really like.
Mm-hmm. Like the fishing,
right? Or, go schlepping somebody to a theater, or going to a shooting range. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up here. We're going to see a movie that you don't want to see, but maybe you would do it for your partner.
Yeah.
It's an activity that you do together. I ask all my couples, okay, did you go to the movie last night? That movie you didn't want to go to with your partner? I did. How was it? Well, it lasted 2 hours. And, I did it. I didn't like it. I didn't want to go, but I did it. Mm-hmm. And I always say to my people, how long does sex take?
Depends.
Usually people say 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're looking at something that we want to do together, right? To please our partner.
Yeah.
So when you think about the other things that you would do, go to a movie you don't want to go to, which is like a 2.5-hour ordeal. Mm-hmm. Sex is, think about this is important. It's the same things. It's important for my partner. I want to do it. I want to make him or her feel good, needed, wanted, cherished. This is what I'm going to do.
But don't you find if someone's going into sex like that, like, I don't know, I would find that, say, if my partner was just having sex with me because he knew that I wanted it, needed it, but he wasn't in the mood, like the movie example, like, that's going to be fun for me.
You don't have to know that. He's doing it for you. You know, you ask your partner, could you clean up the diapers? Could you do this? And he'll do it for you because he cares about you.
Right.
Doesn't matter that he's doing it grumbling. I'm sure once a partner gets started, they're not grumbling anymore.
Right.
It's really getting over that hurdle of, oh my God, I'd rather read my book. I'd rather be in bed. I'd rather, right?
Okay.
But it really is moving into the relationship as a couple. What's important to the other person
just doing
as well.
it because you need to, getting over the hump. Once you start, obviously it's going to be pleasurable for both people, but pushing
Generally.
yourself the way you would push yourself, even if.
Yes, and the rewards after are wonderful. I mean, it's not just orgasm. Orgasm's a great reward.
Yeah.
But the closeness. And you know what I found mostly in my hetero people?
Yeah.
That, you know, men are really easy. And what I mean by that is a man who hasn't...
Men are really easy.
You know, well, I'm going to explain what I mean. Men who haven't had sex in a long time, if they have sex, it fills them in a way. That's how men can respond. They're really great at that, you know, at sex and what it does for them. And they feel connected in a different way. Right? Women have a lot of other ways of feeling connected. They have intimate other relationships. They have close girlfriends or other friends. They're doing things differently intimately.
Yeah.
Men do relationships differently, but sex for them it makes them feel part of something more intimate, feeling. It really does something.
And do you find that it's the women that are usually the shut down ones? You said always in a couple, there's usually one hyper, one hypo. Is it usually the man or not necessarily?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I probably see more women who say to me, I didn't have sex again for the rest of my life. I wouldn't care.
More women.
Yeah. More women. But I hear this from men as well. Right. I just don't have
so
sex
fascinating. And do you see any patterns with people who are okay without sex? Like, do you see any patterns, family of origin patterns or relational patterns that allow them to be more shut off?
That's a good question. I think part of it, because...
Men or women.
Yes, because for me, sex comes from our child state. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't confuse the child with child state. It's our child state. Sex is from the child state where we feel and where we have needs and wants, right? So I think people who are very shut down in their child state from family of origin, weren't allowed to feel, nobody asked them what they ever needed or wanted, that's going to make a difference as well because they don't know how to express themselves.
So like the man that you said that comes in and you ask him how he's feeling and he says, I don't know, he's probably going to be the one who's also shut off intimately.
Probably.
Okay.
Probably.
Just kind of linking it all together.
It could be.
Okay.
It could
so
be.
People who are shut down from their emotional worlds tend to also possibly be shut down in a sexual intimacy.
I think
as they get
there.
More.
Yeah, it's not a correlation. I want to make sure that people don't think it's a correlation. But I think if we're talking about that child part of us, which I say houses our feelings, needs, and wants, if that's shut down, because sex to me is what comes from that state of releasing and exposing and freewheeling and playful, exactly. That there is, I don't know any research or stats on this, but I would say that those who are really shut down from their child state, it would be hard for them to navigate sexually freely and easily.
So even again, not necessarily correlation, but maybe men who are workaholics that are always working, that don't make time for rest and play, they could fall into that category?
Interesting question. Interesting question, because I know a lot of workaholic men who really, really like sex.
Yeah. So maybe it's not.
Yeah.
I guess it's individual.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
I think like the shutdown child state is when I see people with a shutdown child state, that they're not free to feel and they don't trust and they're worried about exposing themselves because sex is pretty open vulnerable. Exposure, right? Really vulnerable, and they don't want to go vulnerable. Sex might be harder. But I think for people who are workaholics, men or women, no, I don't think there's a correlation there.
Okay.
I think that they can easily enjoy sex.
Okay, so back to the prevention. So talking about sex.
Yes.
That's what we trailed off.
That's where
so to keep sex happening and to keep the intimacy, there in a marriage, which is obviously important so that we don't stray, we don't have affairs, and we don't have issues later in life. Talking about sex is important. What else?
Talking about sex, what you like, what you don't like. I think also keeping the relationship and the intimacy close, Because if you're feeling distant from your partner or you're fighting with your partner, nobody wants to have sex, right? Again, in my practice, in the hetero couples, men can be angry and have a fight and still want sex. Women take a lot longer to process this, feel safe to come out, and so on. So I think, a couple that's highly conflicted would be difficult. I think that that's a case for also therapy,
yes,
to manage the conflict.
Yeah.
And I think once you bring down the conflict, or you bring down the feelings of not, trusting, sex can also lead from that. I think that's another point of that.
And then I think also what you're saying too was pushing yourself to do it even when you don't want to.
It's
right on both ends. If you're tired, life is busy. Life is only getting more stressful, right? I hear from a lot of people that I work with too, like, I'm just so stressed, I'm so tired, but it's only going to get more. And if that's your excuse, then it's,
well, you'll always have something
that
right. Years will pass.
Right. So how do you get through that block?
Right. And you know what the other thing, just to bring me back to that, please? I do want to say that after an affair, finding an affair, sex skyrockets. Anybody who's listening, where your partner has had an affair, you've had an affair, right? And you are coming back together. Sex skyrockets.
Why?
Because it's this, it's almost like the beginning of the relationship again. It's this frantic need to hold on to. It's a bit competitive. Am I as good as your other sexual partner? Am I as good as the affair? I will now do things that I didn't do before. So there's a lot that works into that. And that's, anybody who's listening, I think you'll probably be nodding. Oh, yeah, that did happen. Yes.
Wow. And is that a healthy thing, would you say?
I wouldn't even judge it as healthy or not.
It just is what it is.
Because what happens is that level of intensity doesn't last. Right. It's strictly around the finding out of the affair, and now I'm going to move in sexually in a way that I'll be really sexual for my partner.
Okay. So how, again, we know that it's never going to last ever the way it is at the beginning, but how do we keep sex exciting? How do we keep it, if we want to be in a marriage? Like, you've been married how long?
45 years.
Okay, so you've been married 45 years to the same man.
I had to the same man, right? Some people
and
have been married 45
you're still having
years.
sex.
Yes.
Okay. So, and you're probably an anomaly, but how do we keep it with the same? If monogamy is hard, as we've said, but if we're someone who we want to be in a committed marriage, we want it for the long haul, but we also want to be satisfied and excited. How do we do that? How do we keep that passion alive?
I think it's also another thing is to really release the inner child. You said the word, the V word, and that's not vagina.
What? What's the word I say?
Vulnerability.
Oh, vulnerability. Okay. Talking about sex, so I know. Like, what
the
V
word. I think that if we work on our inner children who want to be playful and want to push the envelope a bit, I think that's important in couples who are losing their sex drive or their sexual attraction. Okay. I think the closer a couple is and feels safe and protected, sex can be good again. I do think talking about it is good, but mostly it's really relational. Sex is relational. And how do I want to be relational with my partner? I think that, there's probably a correlation there that for couples who have stopped being relational with each other, sex is probably diminished.
Relational meaning emotionally connected.
Emotionally connected, conversation, seeking
making time for each other.
Making time.
Yeah.
All of that. That's all relational.
Okay. So it's not just about the sex. Likely the sex didn't just end. Likely something else has happened along the way.
Yes, even if it's just a distancing.
Right.
You take your partner for granted. They do that. I'm not that sexually attracted to them anymore. It's been 20, 30, 40 years, right?
They're getting older. They've gained weight.
Right, exactly.
All those things.
But really what sex is the being together and pleasing each other in a way that is very exposed. And you need certain ingredients for that. Okay. Right? Yeah, which is safety and trust and intimacy and all of that, connectedness and companionship, all of that.
Right. So if we're not feeling that in the marriage as a whole, which I think a lot of people struggle with, I think a lot of people struggle with emotional intimacy even more than physical intimacy. Would you not agree?
Yes.
In marriages?
Because sex
can be easier.
Yeah.
right?
Sex, you know what to do, right? Emotional intimacy and drawing from that is really difficult. And that's what we want to teach people.
Yeah.
So when people come to me for therapy, and it's usually one that initiates and says, I'm calling a therapist, we need therapy,
Yeah.
right? What we want to do is that's what we want to work on. Now, some therapists, it's interesting because I've done a few webinars on sex and love and infidelity and all of those. And we used to say that if somebody would feel safe and connected to their partner emotionally and psychologically, then sex will just unfold. Doesn't necessarily happen.
Yeah.
You actually have to kind of work on sex. Because
Another
people
thing.
say,
To work
another
on
thing, exactly. People say to me all the time, look, I'm not feeling connected to my partner. Why would I want to have sex with them? I'm not feeling connected. I'm not feeling understood. I'm not feeling safe. Like, why would I want to? So we as therapists work on that. And then we say, still not having sex. So it doesn't flow. We used to really in the field believe that if you did all these things and put them back together in that kind of emotional, psychological intimacy, that sex would just be a natural byproduct. It's not.
It doesn't. So you're saying
still
it
have to
really
work
is
on
something that
sex.
has to be talked about. It has to be, you have to push yourself to do it, even if you don't want to necessarily, or for your partner, so that you can sort of break that dry spell, so to speak.
Exactly.
And then really make it a priority the way you would make, a date night a priority or a conversation a priority.
Yes.
Okay. I think this is really important stuff because I don't think a lot of people look at sex in that way at all. I think people think it should be natural. And when it's not natural in their marriage, something's wrong with them.
Right.
Or something's wrong with the marriage.
Right.
And this is why I love these videos so much, is because I love illuminating the normalcy that so many people and couples are living in shame about. So I can't tell you how many, sometimes people are sitting opposite, they're like, I have sex in 5 years, and what they say was so much shame, whereas there's nothing to be ashamed of. This stuff is normal. It's not to say that you throw your hands up and you say, okay, but a lot of couples go through this. A lot of people go through this. And these are conversations that we need to have so people know that it's normal, but also know that it can be changed and fixed and worked on.
It can. And it's really important when you're in therapy. How many couples really sit together and say, okay, what do you like? What do you don't like? Do you like when I touch you like this? Do you like to masturbate while I'm inside of you? Do you like anal sex? Do you want to watch porn? I mean, the couples don't generally talk about these things, but therapists are there to kind of talk about this because this is what we talk about.
Right.
And it's not shameful, it's not embarrassing, and therapists are pretty comfortable with it, so that people can start to, wow, okay,
what do I like?
What do I like?
Yeah.
Right? And how do I feel about porn as a, as a stimulant to us as a couple?
What do you suggest around porn? Like, do you think that's a good vehicle?
Yes, I think if two people agree, porn's great.
Okay.
The thing that, you don't want it to be demeaning porn. You don't want it to be, something that is a power struggle. But there is some porn that's takes two people into consideration, right? And if two people agree, I kind of see if two people agree on whatever they want to do, then they agree.
And that even includes, that can even be open marriages, threesomes,
sure,
bringing stuff, like if people are into that to spice it up, then that's
and that's not I like that because I like that you brought that up because I don't want
I find that's happening a lot lately too.
Yes.
I'm seeing swinging and people wanting to swap partners and to keep things exciting. I guess I'm seeing that more and more in my generation.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know if it was prevalent as much then, but what do you like? Do you think that?
Yes, I think that if people agree on this, it can be. We always run the risk when we introduce other sexual partners that something else becomes more exciting. That's the only thing. But I think if there's a starting point, if people agree, then they agree.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting.
And if one says, "Look, I'm not into that at all. I'm not comfortable with that at all," that has to be respected as well. Okay. And then you talk about what people can do together that they feel is mutually satisfying, mutually comfortable.
Very interesting. One last question.
Yes.
Two last questions.
Okay.
My question is, I'm sure there's a lot of marriages or couples that have come in that you've been helpful in, that you've allowed them to succeed, whether it's been an affair, just an emotional disconnection or trauma. And there's been a lot of marriages probably that don't succeed. Oof. Okay. And I'm curious, over the 40 years that you've been sitting with people, what do you see? Is it a characteristic or a personality trait Is it the love?
I'm going to answer that.
What is it that allows marriages to sink and what allows them to
Okay, do you know what to me is and I wonder what other therapists would say about this. And I've talked to therapists about this. People, the ones that don't make it, come to therapy too. And I can feel that as they walk.
Too late.
Too much damage.
Okay.
Too much non-communication. Too much. You can tell as soon as a couple walks in that somebody is sitting with, you can't see me now, but my foot is at the door. I'm here, but I'm done. See what you can do with her. Like do what you want with her. I'm done. And
you can sense that.
I'm sure therapists who have been in practice decades can sense that immediately.
Interesting.
That I always say this to my colleagues. What do you think? I think that they come too late. And the ones that say, look, this is happening. We're not happy, but we really love each other and we want to stay together. Those couples usually do really, really, really well.
Regardless of what's happening.
Yes, I really do.
So maybe coming too late. So then I lied when I said I had 2 more questions. I have one more because of this. Do you think that couples should preventatively be in therapy?
Well, we're talking to a psychologist.
I'm curious what you say about that.
I think that you can learn a lot about being in therapy.
Okay.
I really do.
So regardless of what's happening.
I think it's great because you're always going to learn something. I mean, how many people in relationships are looking at their families of origin and saying, I behave like that. Is that from my family of origin? Did I borrow that from somebody? Is that working for me? Is that my adaptation? Gee, I've learned to shut down when people do. We want to be, what do I say is the ingredient for successful therapy? Curiosity. I want us to be curious. I don't want us to judge or blame our families. Yeah. I want us to be curious.
So we can grow.
So we can't grow, well said. You can't grow without curiosity. Yeah.
And you can't grow in judgment.
And you
cannot grow in judgment.
Well said.
So the answer is yes. Preventative.
I think that would be fabulous.
And I believe this individually that people should be in therapy all the time if they're on a path of growth, whether there's something wrong or not. What brought me to therapy for the first time was trauma, but I'm in therapy now and I feel like my life's amazing, but I'll always be in therapy. Yes. I'll always be trying to grow and change and shift and get curious and work on things because that's the type of person I want to be. And I feel as though if people want a marriage that's going to thrive, then maybe preventatively, they're also kind of maybe once a month even. Yes. It's just something that they do once a month.
Exactly. People don't understand because when
you have couples like that just come in once a month?
Absolutely, I do.
And do you see it makes a difference?
They slide back, but then they get, back on track and they slide and they get back on track. They know the issues that they're dealing with, but I do have many couples who just come for a fix.
Yeah. I mean, they come for a fix and then go.
Yes, and then
go. But the ones
that come for fix, go for a month, come back again.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what you mean.
Yes.
Okay. Amazing. Yeah. Okay. My final question.
Yes.
This is a hard one. Okay. What do you believe is the purpose of life?
Well, okay, I can only answer that sort of personally.
That's the question is for you personally, Donna.
To me, the purpose of life would be successful relationships.
So to cultivate and to work on connection.
I think that's what it's all about. I mean, everybody who comes to therapy comes actually with a relationship problem. And the relationship could be to alcohol. Right? So I think overall it's relational, and the more that people can understand, especially in couples, their triggers, their wounds, their adaptations, their families of origin, much better off they will be.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Always so great. Always so great.
All right. That was good.